should tell him he can leave me out if he wants.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the May 13th Board of Selectmen meeting. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Approval of the agenda, a couple of things we want to add under committee and board reports. An RSU 21 finance report. I also want to add a planning board report for the planning board meeting. And under new business, I'd like to have discussion of the land use ordinance.
Approve as amended.
Motion by Jason, seconded by Phil. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries. Next on the agenda is a public forum. This is for any members of the public to have discussion on anything that is not on the agenda. Anybody interested in a public comment? Please state your name.
Donna DeTingerin. This is gonna overlap, I think, a little bit on what Dan just added to the agenda, but I'm gonna go for it anyway. I attended the public hearing and meeting of the planning board last Thursday night, which lasted for 3.5 hours, and they didn't finish the agenda. There's a ton of things I could address about that meeting, but I'm going to pick two. The first one is one of the reasons for the length of that meeting. And the second one is some of the consequences of the length of that meeting. One of the reasons for the length of that was one of the items that was presented for discussion had to do with moving, well, I shouldn't say that, correcting some omissions in one part of the land use ordinance so that they coordinated with another part of the land use ordinance, which was necessary to do as a result of the reconfiguring of the land use ordinance. There were 6 items on that list, and I brought those along so you could see for sure what I'm referring to. 5 of them were incorrect. Now, the problem with making the meeting a little longer had to do with the fact that some members of the public were there who had actually read the land use ordinance. So they zeroed in on the fact that these things were unnecessary changes.
Donna, what do you, back up just a minute, what do you mean by
Sure.
they were incorrect? 5 were incorrect, what do you mean by that?
They're already done. So the request was to move, well, I shouldn't say that again, to add them to the district level of the land use ordinance. In the list they have, this is permitted, this is conditional.
Yep.
But they're already there. And as a result of the members of the public bringing that up and discussing it at length, there was quite a bit of meeting time that was chewed up for what really was no reason. When I got home, well, not when I got home that night, but first thing the next morning, I pulled out the land use ordinance and I went through it. And it basically took me 10 minutes to figure out what the discrepancy was. This was not a difficult task, but yet it was presented as something that needed to be addressed when it didn't.
We will have that specific discussion later on in the meeting.
I kind of thought you might.
Yeah, that's,
I also looked at, I looked at all of the districts, and in addition to the ones that were incorrect, I found, and this may have been intentional, I don't know whether it was discussed by the planning board or not, but I found 2 districts that should have been addressed that weren't. So we have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 5 errors and 2 omissions. I have a problem with that. If you're going to present something to the public, and if you're going to present something that represents a board or a committee made up of volunteers in this town, it really needs to be accurate. Having said that, yes, mistakes happen, this is unacceptable. As a result of the time spent on that, the agenda was never completed. And at the end of the agenda, there were 3 groups that were there for planning board approval, which meant that some people whose businesses were paying for their representatives to be at that meeting, paid for them to sit there for the better part of 3 hours and do nothing except listen to the discussion. That's a problem also. It is also not an uncommon problem from what I've heard. The final piece is that the 3rd individual who was there for her business never got addressed at all. So she sat for 3.5 hours and got nothing done. And in addition to getting nothing done, at the end of the meeting, or as they, well, not the end of the meeting, but as they were wrapping up the 2nd applicant, the town planner got up during the reading of the finding of fact, picked up his stuff, put it in his briefcase or his carryall, walked in front of the planning board, picked up the nameplates, and then sat down. And at the end of that, there was a comment about, and to be honest with you, at that point, I was so annoyed, I don't know who made it, but someone said to the woman, "We'll have to put you on the next agenda." That was it. Nobody in this town needs to be treated that way. And people are routinely. And it's been going on for a long time. And I know that all or most of you know what the problem is, as do many of the people in this town and many businessmen in this town. And this problem needs to be fixed one way or the other, and it needs to be fixed fast. This is totally wrong. Thank you.
I would like to add that around 10 o'clock, 10 minutes of 10 o'clock, the planning board did state that we have to be out of here by 20 after. So Diane went up, Diane Robbins was here, she went outside, talked to the janitor. She came back and said, as long as you're out of here by 10:30, and that would relate to the audience. At the time that Tad started picking everything up, it was like 25 after 10, and they made the announcement just right around 10:30 that they had to be done, so.
Tomorrow, the RSU public hearing, public vote is at KES, and I'm going to speak to the superintendent, because I can understand if the RSU doesn't want their employee here past a certain amount of time. But those other 2 items that the planning board did took probably 10 minutes for each item. I mean, they were big items. One of them was for a $500,000 addition, commercial addition, and the other one I think was over $200,000. 10 minutes. They read the finding of fact, no discussion, made a vote, it was done. It was, Dan said 25 past 10, I thought it was more like 20, but that's all right. If the finding of fact had been there, and I tried calling Tad today and got no answer, I understand why now. But I understand the planning board goes by his finding of fact. I don't know whether or not he had that ready for the planning board. I don't know if they get their finding of fact before they come to the meeting, to look over before they come to the meeting. But that lady walked out of here practically in tears. She was treated terribly. I mean, there was no apology, there was no, to the cleaner who was here, we're sorry, we're only gonna be another 5 minutes or whatever, because they already said they put the tables and chairs back. I'm gonna ask Katie if that happens. If she has to be out of here by, say, 10:30, let her leave, let her lock up the school. And when the board leaves the library, whether it's any board, leaves the library, turn off the lights. When you go out through that door, it locks behind you. That's it. I mean, those other few minutes could have been spent taking care of somebody who's been before that planning board numerous times, and as far as I'm concerned, her issue shouldn't even be before the planning board. But that's another story.
Question to Roger, was she ready for signature that night? Was everything that you know of ready for a final signature for that application?
I was led to believe that she was.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, and another thing, I understand she had brought her veterinarian with her to speak on her behalf, but the vet could only stay so long, and she left. She couldn't stay. So if they have business, what I suggest, if they have business, then I know you have to have your public hearings first. Put in your business next, get those business people out of here so that they're not paying their attorneys and their engineers, and then take up your public hearings. Or take up all your discussions after that. But that's my suggestion that can be made to the planning board.
So I think we'll talk a little bit about, a little bit later on about the land use ordinance and its inconsistencies, but I think at some point in time here in the near future, we need to have a discussion on the planning board and how it does its business.
Well, my only suggestion to that would be, why don't you coordinate a workshop and have everybody in the same room
Yep.
and discuss those things?
Yeah, I don't wanna have that discussion without the planning board present.
And Ted.
And Tad, I mean, we need to have that discussion with them. I certainly don't wanna say anything behind their back, they need to understand the issues, and it needs to come from us, I think, and, this has just gone on long enough, and I agree 100% with the comments that were made tonight, we gotta make some changes here. Not very business friendly when it comes to stuff like this.
And that's the reputation we're getting, is of being not very business friendly.
Anything else from the public? Okay, with that said, we will move forward to approval of minutes. April 22nd, 2019 minutes.
I didn't see anything in there, so I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
Motion by Velma, seconded by Tom to approve the April 22nd minutes. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried. Okay, committee and board reports. Velma, you've got an RSU 21 finance report?
Yes, and I wanna start with a reminder that tomorrow, is it tomorrow, May 14th?
Yep.
7 o'clock, the public vote is at KES, just a reminder. The key metrics report looks very good, except for the fact that we're being told that legal is already $10,000 over budget. And they put what they call the soft freeze on all the cost centers, to make sure that the funds are there to cover that, because they know that at the end of the year, they're going to end up, how we can move 5% around in our budgets, and that's probably what they're gonna have to do to cover legal. Because the budget is going to be, right now they're predicting it's gonna be very close, and there's going to be very little carry forward. They talked about the fact that we really need more sports fields because it's costing quite a bit. They're using sports fields at other facilities, and especially the ones at UNE, cost quite a bit of money, so that was one of the things they talked about. It was a very, very short meeting, and I think we were out of there at 8:30, we started at 7:30, we were out of there a little after 8 o'clock.
Thank you, Velma. Planning board, May 9th, planning board, they had public hearing on 8 items. The first item, and so we'll start seeing some of these, are we gonna talk about these at all tonight, or have they officially, cause they voted to send some of these to us, and I noticed you've got it listed, but,
As I said, that we can talk about when we get to the warrant, these are what was presented to me by the planner. I put them into the packet. I heard from the planning chairman today that they're having another meeting on the 23rd to address some of these issues,
Okay.
and, that may be modified. So, as when we get down the warrant, my recommendation is not to approve the, sign the warrant tonight, but I wanted to give you all the information that I had, anything that comes up. And I'll report a little bit more of that when we get there.
Alright, so I'll go through real quickly each of the items that they had the public hearing on. One of them was, a revision to land use ordinance 13.2, and that's to, amend the land use map to transfer Hidden Meadows subdivision from the BI district to the R2 district. Item 2 was adoption of land use ordinance 9.3.6, commercial animal husbandry farms, and the associated definitions to be added to land use ordinance 3.2. There was quite a bit of discussion on that one. Item 3 was amendments to land use ordinance 6.1, urban residential district R1. No discussion on that. Item 4, amendments to land use ordinance 3.2, definition of home occupations and repeal and replacement of 9324, home occupations to identify type 1 and type 2 home occupation activities. Item 5 was amendment to land use ordinance 9.3, 14.2, to extend the deadline for registration of existing contractor yards and the addition of contractor yards to the list of permitted and conditional uses in a residential and rural district. This is the item that pretty much took up, I would say, 90% of the planning board meeting, and it was really based on public input and, really showing all the inconsistencies that are in the land use ordinance. So there was a bunch of stuff going back and forth. There was a discussion made later on, and that's the reason why we have the land use ordinance discussion tonight. There was a discussion made that, or suggestion that maybe we should hire a third party to look at the land use ordinance and finally get it squared away. We can have that discussion later on, but that was one of the comments that came out. Item number 6 was the elimination of correctional pre-release facilities from the land use. They don't want any correctional pre-release facilities in town. No discussion on that. Item 7, amendment to land use ordinance 10.6.3.6, increasing the length of the requested extensions from 30 to 60 days in the site plan review process. This is actually gonna work out better. The original intent on that was to make sure that the planning board doesn't sit on applications and, gets things going for the applicant. But what they're finding is there are a lot of other issues that slow this thing down, and it's usually driven on the other side of the table, and they're just trying to make it easier for them folks. Item 8, Rundle Farm Stand, was a major conditional use application. It was a proposal to construct a 10,020 square foot farm retail building serviced by a 480 foot long commercial driveway with 2 parking areas containing 20 parking spaces on a 2.02 acre parcel located on Portland Road, in the DB1 district. Really wasn't a whole lot on that. Then they went to their regular meetings. They recommended to move to the selectmen for the warrant the revision of land use ordinance 13.2. They moved to move to the selectmen the adoption of land use ordinance 9.3.6, the animal husbandry one. Move to the selectmen the land use ordinance of 6.1, urban residential district R1. Item 4, definition of home occupation, they moved to send that to the selectmen to put into the warrant. Item 5, what they did is, they split it up into 2. There'll be one for us on changing the date for the contractor yard, and there was issues with, they didn't think that they could get everything, they need to have another public hearing, so they weren't sure that they could get everything in time for the next meeting, so I guess we'll have to wait for that one. Item number 6, the elimination of the pre-release facilities, they moved to send that to us, and then also the land use ordinance 10.6.3.6, increasing the extension from 30 to 60 days. Pending applications, the Arundel Farm Stand, the one that I spoke of earlier, for a 10,020 square foot farm retail building, they approved that. Arundel Machine, is putting in a proposal to construct a 22,163 square foot expansion to their existing, manufacturing facility. And at the next lot over, they're also looking to construct a new 11,200 square foot manufacturing facility. So they approved that. And the last item on the agenda, which was Rontu's dog daycare, didn't have time for that, we adjourned at, actually I put 10:25, we adjourned. So, that's the planning board. Yes, Roger?
Who actually sets the agenda? Is it the chairman? Because I've been told two different things. Is it the planner or is it the chairman? Because part of the problem with these things, when you rock the boat, like Kristen Woodward did with the land use ordinance change, it seems like she's got a bullseye on her. Because she's been in front of these people before and gets buried in the agenda every time. She's been 2 years doing this, for something that, like Donna said, she could have been operating for 10 years if nobody would have known it.
So I think
It's
it's a
just-
combination of the two. There, I believe, the chair sets it most of the time, and there are times when the planner sets it, but he reviews it with the chair, and then they make that final determination.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. The chair comes into the office, they sit down, they set the agenda.
Well, like everybody's told you so far, and you was here the other night, but for the rest of them, this was awful painful to sit here and watch. And you didn't have to be a genius to sit there and look at your watch or look at the clock like they were doing on a regular basis, and no, they weren't gonna get through that.
I mean, when you have an agenda, you never know what's gonna come up, right? I mean, sometimes
true.
things come up and it's understandable, but I think with all of the inconsistencies in the land use, they're their own enemy, and that's what's creating all of this extra time, and they really can't get to the other things because of this.
What was ironic was one of the people that was in for review is probably one of the biggest taxpayers in the town of Arundel now, and started in the basement across from the school. Started a small business where all these things start. And there was two other ones that were starting out as small business. And they sat there and they waited for 3 hours. Maybe they should have never been on that night's agenda, because things get out of hand. Especially when you let everybody chime in 10 times over something that shouldn't even have been there. That's the painful part. These people, two of them had consultants there. They didn't sit there for free. That's bad.
Yeah.
I think the planning board's business should be at the end of the agenda, and the applicants should come first.
I think these are things that you really need to sit down with the planning board and discuss. Like before the night is over, we probably should at least throw out some dates of, possible workshop that we can sit down and have them come here and go over the concerns that are being addressed. What can be done to expedite some of these projects. I'm not privy to the entire process, but I've been informed that, oftentimes applicants should have had an advocate assisting them through this whole process, which would help them, eliminate some of the length that we're going through. Not quite, that's true or not, but something that needs to be addressed as well. Because I think that's one of the things that I hear all the time.
Yeah.
I'm here, what do I need? They get a list, they have to finish the list. If they don't finish the list and they come back, you haven't finished your list, I mean, what are we supposed to address? So I think those things need to be ironed out as well, so.
Yeah, and it's hard to, I think, Phil brings up a valid point, but to be the devil's advocate on that, you advertise for a public hearing. And if you have business that happens, you know, beforehand, and then you get to the public hearing and it's 10 o'clock, and then you don't have time for the public hearing, then you gotta cut that one short and re-advertise again, and, you know, I'm not sure how that's gonna go, but, you know, I think,
Well, I wasn't there at the meeting, do you think, and I would talk to Rich about this anyways, do you think if the chairman had a more aggressive role in limiting the discussion? I mean,
Yeah,
if you've talked about, if somebody stood up and made a point, and then somebody else wants to make the same point, I think at some point, somebody needs to say, hey, look, that point's been made, we heard it.
yeah, I mean, Jamie he did at times,
Oh, okay,
and then
Jamie,
and Rich wasn't here, but, you know, and I think, I mean, somebody else started to talk, and he cut them off, and she continued to talk, and, but, you know, I think it could have been done earlier,
Yeah.
but again, you know, I know that we let people talk, right? You know, we run into this before, we've had somebody stand up and we get chastised if we cut people off, but again, you know, I think Jamie finally said, listen, if you're not bringing the same thing up again, but by that time, it had gone on way too long, so.
You know, there's no harm in putting time limit on the public hearing.
Yeah, Yep, and that's something that we can
Yeah,
have
you can
that
do that.
discussion with the planning board and say, listen, you know,
Right.
you pick a time and that's it, and you tell the public, listen, you got 10 minutes.
Yep.
Dates a piece in 10 minutes, and then we're moving on to the next one.
Correct.
One
That's
other
true.
comment, one thing Keith just said, when you have someone like Kristen who went to the planning board and didn't have an advocate, she didn't have, go out and hire an attorney, she didn't go out and hire, all the people that, to do it, she did everything herself. So she had no advocate, but she would go to Tad and say, I have this, she did everything herself, and she would take it to Tad, and Tad would tell her she was fine, and then as happens with so many people, when she would get to the planning board, they needed something else. They wanted something else, a little bit of this, and I mean, it's been going on all this time, and if I had been her when I walked out of this meeting the other night, I would have been in tears, and insulted.
Okay, that's it for committee and board reports. Let's move on to the manager's report.
Yes, just a follow-up on the status of the Arrow, I spoke with Simone, and she's agreed to be its de facto editor as we move forward. We're gonna try 4 times a year to provide the information. We have a list of civic groups and departments that we're gonna reach out to provide us information. We're gonna limit that to a paragraph, no more than a little paragraph, to try to keep it just as a small newsletter. And we developed a outline to proceed, so that's our plan moving forward. She's on board. I think it will become a little more consistent as we move forward.
Yeah, we gonna get one out before town meeting?
Yes. Yeah, we'll probably also send out a handout with once the warrant's approved, with a draft warrant with explanations on it, as I've done in the past, to provide more information to the public prior to meeting the town meeting. I think that works fine, I think it helps people understand what we're seeking.
Excellent, good news. Thank you. Old business.
Yes, we had postponed any action on this, at the last meeting, this land purchase development agreement contract for map 33, lot 33. I've brought it back forward because I think we've addressed the concerns that were being outlined then, and there was also some clerical errors within the document based on where the applicant had signed, so we've got a clean copy here. I would like to recommend that we go ahead and have a motion second to approve this installment agreement with this person. And I've asked Velma to abstain from action tonight, she's a notary. Someone would have been here, but she didn't make it, so, yeah, we'll have Velma abstained, she can witness the signature, she'll come in tomorrow and notarize it for us.
Okay, any discussion on that? Tom, have you had a chance to look at that at all?
Yeah, I did, I checked it out and Keith is correct, we need to use that form.
With that said, I'm looking for a motion to accept the lease purchase installment contract map 33, lot 33.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Phil, seconded by Jason. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
And one
And one
abstention.
abstention.
Yeah.
I'll just, this is, page 3 is the one to sign, and then Velma can do her magic tomorrow on the other page.
Delete her name out of the acknowledgement.
Yeah, I will.
Okay. Moving on to new business. First item is discussion of LD 1542.
Yeah, I got a call from,
Todd.
Kennebunk Light and Power District, indicating that this bill was being addressed on Tuesday, the 7th, for the first reading. In essence, what it is, it would, if the utility and the municipality can agree, it would allow a municipality to enter into an agreement with just one utility to provide utility services through the entire community. The reason I put it on there is we've never discussed this. I think we've talked about our relationships, at least with Central Maine Power and Kennebunk Light and Power. And I'm not quite sure if it's something that you want to endorse, you want to, if they have another public hearing, to provide support to. It's quite lengthy, and the more I read it, there's quite a bit that has to be done in order for a municipality as well as utility to agree to it. There's certain times when the referendum can be voted upon, and then there's certain steps that have to be followed as you go through it. So, is it something that you wish to pursue further? What are your thoughts on it? I think that's what I'm looking for tonight.
Have you talked to Todd at all since the Tuesday?
I haven't spoken to him yet.
I guess my first comment is, does he even have access for the capital funds to be able to purchase all that from CMP?
Well, that's another part of the equation, yeah.
Right. You know, I mean, he would have to purchase all of that and,
All their infrastructure.
right.
I thought that years ago that Kennebunk Light and Power had done something, because all of Kennebunk is not covered by Kennebunk Light and Power. There are parts down at Kennebunk Beach that are under Central Maine Power. Parts of Arundel have Kennebunk Light and Power. It comes up the Limerick Road, I think as far as,
The lobster place, the wholesale lobster on the left-hand side.
yeah.
It's as far as it goes.
And so there are, and the people that I know that have Kennebunk Light and Power, the impression is that they pay, that their light bills are a lot less than those of us with Central Maine Power. On the River Road, it goes down to the railroad tracks, it stops at this side of the railroad tracks. And our Central Maine Power electricity actually comes down the Log Cabin Road and up the River Road to come to our house, and it stops again at the railroad tracks. But I'd love to see what they could do. But I thought years ago that they had tried to come to an agreement with Central Maine Power, and that the cost of the poles and the equipment and everything was astronomical for them to even cover all of
Yeah,
Kennybunk.
they would have to come up with a financial ability to do it, and you know what that means, the ratepayers would be paying for any additional costs and the associated. I think right now they're just looking to see if it's an option statewide, even though it's been, seems to be promoted by the representative from Kennebunkport. I looked to see if anybody else had signed on to the bill, and nobody had signed on, so I don't know how far it's gonna go, if the public hearing, I was just gauging what you folks thought, if it was something that you felt it was interesting to pursue or not pursue.
I mean, I saw a little bit of this on the news,
Oh, okay.
but, I mean, from my perspective, it doesn't hurt to look into it. I'm not sure if Todd is, you know, is looking for anything from us, but,
Well, when he called me, it was late, he asked if anybody could go up and speak, and I said, well, wait a minute. You know, we're not speaking about anything until the board says something to me about, endorsing it or supporting it in some way, so, that's the way I left it, and that's why it's here tonight.
And I've never actually compared apples to apples on a light bill, how much they pay per kilowatt hour, how many kilowatt hours they use compared to somebody else to see, you know, where the equality is or where the inequality is. It's just a perception that Kennybunk Light and Power is cheaper than, if you're on Kennybunk Light and Power, you pay less than you do if you're on Central Maine.
and understandably so, but that's probably gonna change if they have to procure capital funds to buy all of that
Yeah.
stuff. That doesn't come for free, so, you know. And again, you know, I'm not sure if the bill in the past, I would tend to think, not tend, but I assume that CMP could probably ask whatever the heck they want, and the bill probably might have a third party to say, hey, what's the fair market value for the
They have
assets?
to have an independent
I know
price.
there was some discussion on that when they talked about it on the news, but I didn't dive into
Well,
the
I'm sure
bill,
the
so.
PUC gets involved in that too, so.
Yeah,
um,
exactly,
And
whereas,
they never do us any favors, sorry.
But, you know, outside of the expense, I'm a customer of Kennybunk Light and Power, I don't know how.
Yeah.
But the only thing that I found is, you know, if you call somebody up at Kennybunk Light and Power, they actually respond.
Yeah.
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 Having worked with both outfits before, it is night and day, folks,
Yeah.
night and day.
yeah,
I would like to see us look into it and see what it entails.
Yeah,
to
I'd love
move
to
it
see, I'd
forward.
love to see the new town hall under Kennybunk Light and Power, and then we could sell them back our excess electricity.
I mean, it certainly doesn't hurt to be behind the bill and push for it. Voter approval will probably end up making that final decision anyway, I would guess, but, you know, at least, I'm okay with moving forward and trying to, you know,
Okay, that's all I need for now, I'll keep you posted as to what we find out, I'll talk with Todd, I don't know if it will come out of committee, or we'll find out. I think there's a, you know, there's a public perception out there that Central Maine Power is such a big, you know, utility now, that their internet customer service is lacking tremendously, and as a result of that, I think they have a huge public perception problem, so there needs to be support for it.
Okay, next item on the agenda is, possible secret ballot for November 2019 for the town municipal building.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this sort of came up, at the end of one of our meetings, about looking at the, possibility of having an option to, instead of having a special town meeting, open special town meeting, to, try to go for a secret ballot, process and try to meet the November election period in order to, seek approval for the municipal, new municipal building. At first, I sort of, I, for the lack of knowledge if we had any limitations within our charter or anything to that extent, I was a little bit cautious, but after we looked at it, it's certainly a possibility that, this town could move forward with a referendum, or a secret ballot vote, in November. And I guess what I'm trying to gauge here tonight is whether or not it's something, you as a municipal board wish to pursue. If it is, then we will take steps to advise the municipal, the building committee of that task, as well as the subcommittee that we meeting tomorrow night about the process. I think the timeline that we've indicated with the architect certainly fits within meeting the goal here of having something ready for the November election. And so it's doable. I guess it just comes down to, is that the way you wanna proceed? I guess sending out the pros and cons, I can see, that if you go to a secret ballot, you're certainly gonna have more voters that will be voting on the issue. We will be required to hold a public hearing, which would be probably, an extension of the informational meetings that we've already held on this subject, to provide more information to the public prior to vote. And you'll get more people that will certainly come, and vote on it. If you go to the open town meeting, if history is telling us anything, we may get 150 people that will show up out of the voters in the community to vote on this bond issue. So, it's something to really think about, whether we're gonna get enough voters, but that decision is up to you guys. How do you wanna proceed? And whatever you decide is what we'll implement. Procedurally, it's a little more work, there are deadlines that we have to meet. Both Emily and I have spoken about them, and we're really comfortable about moving through that process. So whatever you decide to do, but a decision would be nice to have.
But that means that all the stuff that we're waiting for from Port Harbor, they gotta hit all of those dates.
Port City.
What did I say? Port Harbor, and I'm thinking about
You got boat on me.
Arena, yeah. Port City, all of the line items that, we discussed at the last meeting, and, they have to hit all those dates, because we could be in the middle of having public hearings or what have you, and then not be ready, right?
We'd have to, according to the timeline, by September 20th, we'd have to have an order from the municipal officials to move forward with a secret ballot. We'd have to have absentee ballots in the ballot approved, absentee ballots available on October 4th, and then election day would be November 5th.
So we probably wouldn't have the DEP stuff by that first date, by September, based on the timeline that they gave us last time.
We may.
I think that's the key right there, is to make sure, I'm okay with it, I'm on board, I just wanna make sure that, those dates can be hit.
Yeah.
And if not, what's the repercussions if we advertise and then we don't have a secret ballot? Can we do that? Once we advertise, are we bound to do the secret ballot?
I think that you would have, I think there'd have to be some sort of opinion after, if you advertise it and you're having the ballots are written and you're having people come to the polls, you're gonna vote on it. Now, whether or not you have all the other approvals from DEP, at least you'll have your money approved. And then at that point, you could wait for the rest of it.
But that money might change depending on what
Well,
the DEP comes back.
I don't, yeah, I don't think it's gonna be that much.
Yeah.
That's not what the engineers or the folks have told us, that we're gonna have a lot of DEP licensing requirements for this project,
That
so.
site.
I think it's doable.
So I raised this with Keith, because I assume that all of us believe that, voter participation in this circumstance, we want as much as we can get. And I was concerned when I was looking at the timeline, that we were gonna have a special town meeting sometime in October. And I'm saying, special town meeting's got the problems that Keith just alluded to, but, probably been the first day of the first World Series game, and with the Red Sox in it, and nobody's gonna come anyway, so. So that troubled me, and even though I don't think there's a whole lot of real controversial items on the November 5th ballot, if people have May the 8th to vote, so they can do it in accordance with their schedule, you get more participation, because they don't have to show up at 7 o'clock on a weekday evening with conflicts in schedules and kids to worry about, and those types of things. the downside is, if in fact there is, opposition, that, and I think we experienced this with the comp plan, Donna, if I'm not mistaken, that all of a sudden leaflets and flyers are out there, you know, asserting clearly false information that we didn't have time to respond to. Didn't that happen?
Yeah,
Yeah.
number
Well,
of
that
years.
shouldn't
Something
happen.
about we couldn't have a garden or something like that.
Yeah, yes.
And that happened with the piece of property.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. You're not gonna have an open debate, be able to, you know, cross the table and say, no, that's inaccurate, but.
Right.
But again, I don't, you know, 100 people making this kind of decision,
But that's my concern.
yeah.
If we have a special town meeting, you send out the postcards, the people that are interested show up. If you put it on a secret ballot, 90% or more of the people that show up to vote on that will have never come to a public hearing. They're gonna look at it, I mean, they might have gotten information from their neighbor or from somebody else, and they're gonna vote totally on the amount. They're gonna look at that amount, and if that amount scares them to death, they're gonna vote no, with no background information about why that amount is there at all. That's my worry, is the fact that those are the ones that are gonna show up to vote with no information to vote on.
Well, that's a legitimate concern, but I think that's our responsibility to get the information out there. And if people are voting no because of the dollars, well, I think we have to look at that, you know? If dollars are scaring them, I mean, so be it. Then we have to adjust and
That-
modify,
Yeah,
bring the dollars down.
I'm all
that's my
for it.
only concern.
Yeah,
I'm all
we've
for
had,
it.
we've had a number of progress reports out, we've had 2 information meetings. If we go to the secret ballot, we're gonna have to have a public hearing, to discuss it. We'll have another bite at that apple, plus more information going out. It's certainly your decision to make.
Are we putting, and I forgot, I want to look at it, are we putting anything in the town book on the municipal, it's like Jack putting a write-up?
Yes, he is.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
I mean, I wrote a, you know, so,
Yeah, I
just
did
a
too, a
quick
little
snippet
bit.
on it, so that's more information that we're getting out also, so. Yeah, okay, good.
I think you'd have to, if you're a Rundle resident, and you haven't heard about the municipal building project, I think you're,
They're living way up in the woods with
Yeah, I
no
think so.
electricity.
I think so, I think we're trying to get information out there.
But we think, yeah, it's still gonna come down to the number,
Yeah,
It is.
you know, it's,
and I think, you know, I'm 100% on board, we can shore up with the committee and make sure that we hit those dates. I'm on board.
Okay.
And if
Was that
it's a
hearing-
light, if it's a light turnout, then we may be the only ones that go out there to vote anyway.
No.
Unless I hear any strong objections, I'll go ahead and move forward with the secret ballot. I don't think we're gonna need a vote, other than you guys giving me the okay to move forward with it.
And we get time for that anyway, so.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you'll have to officially vote on the ballot and everything on the 20th. If you reject it at that point, then we'll have to,
we still have time to do a special town
yeah,
meeting.
we could do a special town meeting at that point if we had to.
Okay, good. Next item is, let's see, approval of a Rundle Town Meeting warrant.
Yeah, and after our discussion, this evening, you know, we're just gonna table that at this point until we get additional information from the, planning board on the ordinance, changes that they're looking to try to attack here. We still have, plenty of time to have you folks sign a warrant. I think our only hiccup right now is that we really would like to be able to get a warrant that's published in the town report as accurate as we possibly can prior to the report being published. So that will be something that we'll have to work a little bit, but like Emily and I spoke, we only need 7-day notice to get that warrant posted. So we've got plenty of time. And the planning board's going to meet, according to the chairman of the planning board, this Thursday on the 23rd, to try to wrap up whatever issues they have on the warrant, on the ordinances that they're bringing forward. And so we can meet on the 29th, which we'll be meeting on Monday the 29th, So we can finalize it then if we need to.
So is it the planning boards, are they gonna try to get everything that they talked about at the public hearing?
No idea.
Okay.
The only thing, Rich was in Ohio, so when he was speaking to me, we were speaking a little bit, quicker than normally if he came in my office and chatted about it, but, you know, his thought was that there needed to be a little more, effort and some more work on this before they really moved it forward, so.
If we wait till the 29th, you can have time to get this printed in,
Well, that's the other
That's the
thing.
issue. Well,
Yeah.
27th you guys would meet again, right, not the 29th?
Well, is it the
27th is
27th?
Memorial
Or that was
Day.
Monday,
Okay.
is it okay.
Okay, so well, if they prove it on the 23rd, we could actually meet by the end of the week. We could either go, we could go Friday or Monday.
Monday's Memorial Day,
Is it?
yeah,
Oh, 27th, oh, maybe that's why.
Yeah, on Friday.
yeah, because our service for the town is at the, Veterans, is Sunday, May 26th, so.
Okay. Well, let's let the planning board, they're gonna meet on the 23rd, and I'll tell them to expedite their process. I think that the publisher only needs about a week or so turnaround.
That would be a Simone question, I think, though, I think I've heard her say about a week turnaround,
Okay,
so. That would really be.
close.
yeah, we're gonna be close.
Don't have to-
Yeah.
We may have more on the 23rd, if they pull everything, then we'll just put the warrant together and have you guys, you know, we'll get it signed.
Donna?
I just have a question for Keith. Did Tad talk to you about the possibility of a public hearing on the 30th?
Yes, he did.
Because if they, with the commercial animal husbandry farm piece and the residential one piece, if they can make the changes that they need there, that will require another public hearing because they're substantive changes.
I think if they wait till the 30th, I think we're gonna be right up against it. I don't think
Well,
we're gonna
yeah,
be
that
able
was
to
the
meet
reason for it, cause as I'm hearing you talk about schedule, I
Yeah,
thought that
yeah,
was
there was some thought, but today Rich told me the 23rd, this Thursday they were gonna meet, so.
Well, yeah, they have their regular meeting on the
Okay.
23rd, during which time they will hopefully iron out the problems with the language in the commercial animal husbandry farm piece. If they iron that out, then that would need to go to public hearing.
Yeah, if they have to go to a public hearing, I think they're gonna miss the warrant.
The other thing on that is Tad was supposed to get with the state to see if the
Right.
changes that they were gonna do warranted resubmitting back to them.
Okay.
If it had to be resubmitted back to them, then there was no way that was gonna make it, but there was some discussion on
Yeah, I'll get a
buffering
chance
from
to-
water sources.
Yeah, Tad will be in the office tomorrow afternoon when he comes back from Connecticut, so I'll have a discussion with him on that, but, yeah, if it's to the 30th, I think they're gone too long, and they're not gonna make it. So, whatever they gotta do on the 23rd, if they resubmit and they meet the requirements, that's fine. If they have to go to a public hearing, then I think you're gonna miss this annual town meeting.
Yes, Donna?
Unfortunately, that takes me back to something that I made a suggestion about last year at this time. And that is, if we're going to have public hearings on things that are potentially controversial, which is pretty much anything the planning board or the comp plan ever puts out, that needs to be done with sufficient lead time, so that when you need the second public hearing, you can have it. Because now, on this commercial animal husbandry thing, this has been worked on for 2 years now. And if it's still not going before the public for a vote, it's bordering on ridiculous.
I think that's part of some of the discussion that we have with the planning board, you know, I mean, I've noticed the past couple of years, it's, you know, at the very last minute, and it's push, to try to meet this, and it just, I don't know, it just kind of blows my mind as to why these things are at the last minute, so.
Well, one of the instructions we gave him after our last process was, I said to Tad, I said, whenever you guys have a ordinance that has been approved and you've had public hearing on it, submit it to the selectmen and get it out of your hands and get it into selectmen's hands, and then it's up to them to decide when that special or annual town meeting will take place, and then, you know, gets the monkey off their back, so to speak. Their thought on that is that there may be multiple hearings, and the cost would be, further, to the community as a result of that. And I'm not quite sure that resonates real well with me at this point, I just soon get the stuff in your hands and let you guys decide whether or not you can put it on the warrant.
It can't be a very high cost. In the scheme of things, you know.
I don't think so either.
Okay.
So, let's just hold it, and I'll have it in front of you by hook, by crook, at a time that gives you plenty of time to review. I would encourage you all that the warrant that I gave you, with the exception of the land use, changes, are all our warrant articles that we've approved. They've been sent to legal for review. I've incorporated whatever changes she suggested within the warrant article. Didn't change the number amount, it was more, language things to make it flow better. She asked me a bunch of questions on some of the other things, and we sorted that all out, so. I'm pretty confident the warrant that you have in front of you, particularly for our portion of it, is solid.
Okay. Closure of town office, June 4th.
Yes, I'd like to have permission to close the office on June 4th to allow staff to go to a training on the Trio operating system in Bridgeton. Trio is our overall software program that provides us the budgets, cash receiving, tax billing, clerks programs. There have been some modifications, I'm sure that Emily can probably give you more detail than I, but I think it's important, the staff has come forward to me, and would like to see that happen so they get some additional training on the program. So I'm seeking permission to close, the office for that day.
And everybody in the office would go to that?
Yeah, I think the
Except for-
clerks,
Yeah, the downstairs, everyone
Yeah.
downstairs would go, no one upstairs.
Yeah.
yeah, nobody upstairs would go. And we've done that before for training, we've closed it downstairs, so, that would be very helpful to our staff.
But upstairs is our
You've got code, planning, and assessing.
so assessing doesn't need to be part of this?
The invitation went out to her, but she declined.
Yeah, she has various,
Yeah.
they have various assessing training put on by Trio for her.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
she may feel comfortable that she's all set with that.
I'm looking for a motion from the board to allow Keith to close the town office June 4th, 2019.
So move.
Motion by Velma, seconded by Jason. Any other discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries. Okay. RSU 21 warrant and notice of election.
Yeah, one of your duties is to sign the ballot validation referendum warrant, at least co-sign it with the majority of the school board. So I have, I'd like to seek approval to do that, and I have several signatures that need to be placed on this document.
Okay. For a motion to sign the RSU 21 warrant and notice.
Second.
Motion by Jason, seconded by Velma. Any discussion? All those in favor? Send them on down. Plenty of ink.
Yeah,
Oh, actually, I'm
next time you go to a meeting, get one of the RSU things. Well, the last time I was there, they were pretty well done, and they're not replacing them, because that's kind of the soft. Yeah.
Was there 4 of them?
Yeah.
While you do that, I'm gonna leave this on your desk. Normally be in to
Oh,
notarize it
right.
tomorrow morning.
Yep.
I'll just leave it just like this,
Perfect.
alright?
Yep.
Figure out where. Signature so legible.
There's more, why don't you
See you tomorrow?
Yeah.
Tomorrow night?
Okay.
Hey, which committee is tomorrow night?
That is the subcommittee on going over the draft of the architect's drawings, wall systems, roof systems, finishes, that kind of thing.
I hear I'm on that committee?
Yeah, you
Oh,
are.
all right.
You didn't make the meeting, so you got submitted.
7 o'clock here?
No, it's 4 o'clock.
Thanks, Phil.
It's 4 o'clock in the town hall.
Say hello, see what you get.
I'll teach you.
I'm gonna try to attend.
Yeah, so it'll be 4 there. Jack and I will be there too, Dan, if you don't make it,
Yeah,
just,
I'm gonna try to attend, there's just a. Try to
So,
talk
but-
about furniture.
We'll wait for that.
All set?
Yeah.
Oh, you wanted the last
Oh,
meeting?
you were at last
I
meeting,
went off on a
when you
tangent.
talked about furniture.
I started something that went on forever.
Yeah.
Chairman didn't do a good job of curtailing. Okay, okay, next item is, discussion of the land use ordinance and some of the inconsistencies with the land use ordinance. So there was a suggestion made at the planning board meeting, for those of you that have kind of been following the planning board for a while. We all know that they've been working on these land use revisions for a long, long time. They were working back when I was on the planning board, and I'm on my 3rd term here as a selectman, so it's been quite a while that they've been working this ordinance. And it seems like every meeting that I've attended to, and you guys have attended to, you know, Phil and Jason probably more than I have, but when they start talking about land use owners, it just seems like every time there are more and more inconsistencies throughout that land use ordinance. And I think it's time we do something, whether we hire a 3rd party or, I don't know, maybe have a part of our workshop discussion with them. I think it's time we put this issue to bed. This is just going on and on and on, and I, you know, I know that I've heard of other towns, you know, redoing their land use ordinance, but I don't think it's taken 7, 8, 9 years to do that, so, that, I kinda wanted to put that out.
When you say redo it, and you'll have to correct me if I'm going down the wrong path here, but are we finding that there are portions that are being approved, that old portions haven't been taken out, and so there's reference to, sections that don't exist any longer? Is that what we're talking about?
I can't give you the specifics, but I know that there's a bunch of inconsistencies throughout, and some of that sounds like it is.
Okay.
And what'll happen sometimes is they'll come forth with a revision, and it doesn't match other stuff, as what happened at the last meeting, and, it just, I know that it's not an easy job to be on the planning board, but, you know, you've got some members on that planning board that have, and, to be frank, they've been on the planning board for many, many years, they don't have you know, they can't pick anything out of the land use ordinance. They have no clue where to go look, and I don't know, I don't think that's a good planning board to do that, you know, when you mention a section, and then they have to ask every time, well, where is that located? And I think that leads to why we're having some of these things, and I think sometimes Tad just gets off on a tendency sometimes, and, you know, goes around and around, and then we forget where we started off from, but.
So is it something that you wanna have further discussion during a workshop session with the planning board, or do you want to look at various options to take a look at the ordinance and change it? 'Cause right off the top of my head, I'm thinking of Southern Maine Regional Planning that would come in and take a look at your ordinance and try to take care of the discrepancies, or you could also, and I don't know what the cost would be, but, you know, you could also have your own, an attorney or law firm that deals in land use issues quite a bit, take a look at it and clean it up. So there's a variety of ways we can look at it. Or do you wanna sort of go to the workshop session and say, this is a concern, how are we gonna address it?
I wanted to bring it up to the board and get input from the board and see what their thoughts were. And maybe it's just me, you know, I don't know, but I wanted to see what the rest of the board members thought.
I can represent to you that there isn't an ordinance in this state that doesn't have inconsistencies throughout.
You're probably right.
They all do because they enact an ordinance and then they continually amend it, and nobody goes back through to see whether our amendment has affected. What you need to do is you need to start from old cloth and put it all together, but that's an inexpensive proposition. If you hire counsel to go through that ordinance, if there are inconsistencies, I don't want the job.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It would be enormously expensive.
Is it, could we create our own third party? I mean, it seems like there's enough people in town that have an issue with this. Would there be a group that could take this one at a time and,
Jesus, I'm not quite sure you can do that.
like a cleanup crew, you know? I mean, not necessarily write it, but just clean it up.
We just did some of it.
I know, but, you know, but it's
Yeah,
a third party
because
committee and.
How many weeks did it, or months did it take us just to deal with that
Mhm.
particular section of it?
How many inconsistencies did we find there?
Yeah.
No.
So, you know, I could reach out to, the Southern Maine Regional Planning and see if there's a cost associated with it. I mean, we do have a membership, but I don't think it covers this kind of extensive research and review, but they may be able to give me a ballpark figure as to what kind of money it would be. That would give you a reality check as to where we're gonna be.
See, what classically happens is you find the inconsistency, and then you have an amendment to fix the inconsistency, and it just rolls on and on like that.
I understand that, but, you know, we're upsetting the public, you know, the businessmen that, you know, we wanna be open for business, we wanna, and I've heard this time and time again, it's like pulling teeth. Now, granted, I don't think our board is any different than any other planning board in the state, cause, you know, I talk with people, you know, I work in a big company and I hear people bitch and complain about some of the other planning boards around, so, you know, but when you mention planning board, everybody just kinda cringes anyways, but.
I'm gonna be the most unpopular person in this room before this night's over. First of all, as a taxpayer, if we spend one dime more on this land use ordinance than we already spend on a town planner, I could be very upset. Dan is right in terms of, back up. I'm somewhat familiar with the planning board, because for years I was married to somebody who was on the planning board. So I heard a great deal about it. This past year, in the joint sessions we've had with the planning board and the compound committee, I've seen, you know, how all of this works firsthand. The land use ordinance is a mess to a point. I don't think we need an act of Congress to fix the mess. I think what we need is to have somebody with an organized mind to simply go through and make sure that, you know, Part A matches with Part B. What I'd really like to see happen is somebody take a book of matches to the entire ordinance and start over with something very simple and straightforward. That's not going to happen, and I know that. But it shouldn't be that big a task. And Dan's point about, you know, some planning board members not being terribly familiar with what's in the land use ordinance is true. I've seen it happen. And part of the problem with any committee, I don't wanna pick on the planning board, cause they do yeoman's work, they work hard, I know that. And I'm not picking on them as the people doing the job. But part of the problem is that if you're going to have something be understandable, you kinda have to show up to all the meetings. I've seen that with, you know, the comp plan committee, we get together, you have, you know, one or two people who show up occasionally. And every time they show up, you have to get them caught up with what you've just done in the last two meetings. That's extremely frustrating, it is time consuming, it's time wasting, and it also leads to mistakes. And that's part of the committee problem. But the land use ordinance itself, in my opinion, really needs somebody to sit down, take it section by section, not necessarily even as a committee, just somebody who is an organized thinker and say, okay, like this piece that I presented to you tonight, that was 10 minutes work. Section 6 versus section whatever the devil it was, 9. A, B. In fact, that's what I put together. that would fix that whole problem. And if you compare one list to another list, or one definition to another definition, that solves that problem. Another piece that might help is, in those places in the ordinance, where it refers to a specific action or item, let's say, I'll just pick the word trailer. So you have the word trailer in the ordinance, but in the definitions, it defines what a trailer is. In the ordinance, take that word and underline it or italicize it. So when somebody is reading that section of the ordinance, they say, ah, trailer. Well, that doesn't mean what I think a trailer is, that means something that they're defining. So you go to the definition, you know what you're talking about. And that eliminates a lot of the confusion that people have about what it is they're supposed to be doing with whatever their project is. A suggestion that was made a long time ago and has never been implemented is to take the land use ordinance by task, so to speak. So, or district, if you will. So, I wanna put up a building in R3. I go to Tad, or whoever the planner is, or maybe to the CEO, and say, okay, I wanna put up a building to do, whether it's a residential building or a business in R3. And I get handed a book, paperback bound, spiral binding, that says R3, and that's all the stuff for R3 that applies to my project. So I don't have to go through 3 inches of hundreds of pages that don't apply to me. It's a time-consuming task to put together, but the time it will save in the long run, and it will also solve the problem of, okay, here I am with my checklist, and I've done all these things, and now, oops, somebody just added something to my checklist. Because the checklist is in that little book. So I'm doing something in R3, these are the rules for R3, all of them. And these are the things I have to do something in R3, all of them. That's basically clerical work. I don't think we need to hire somebody with a special talent, we certainly don't need a lawyer, no offense, Tom. It's just a matter of putting the pieces together in a logical fashion.
Yeah.
So, for what that's worth, I don't know. If I thought there was any hope of ever seeing the light at the end of this tunnel, I would volunteer to help with that.
I just think it's a lot of work for one person.
Well-
That's why I mentioned the committee.
Yes, it is a lot of work for one person, but if you had one person who basically came up with a roadmap, then yes, you could have, different people volunteer to do different sections, you pull it together at the end. But the fact that it's been going on for a decade tells you have a problem.
And
I will tell you, it's not a unique one,
Yeah.
not to this community.
And
I practice in other areas,
I do not disagree
they're
with you,
just as bad.
but I think we may be
Maybe worse.
defining a different problem.
The problem I find is, you read one page and you do what that page says, you take it to the planning board, and then they go back 6 pages down and say, oh no, you can't do what that says. I've seen that happen several times. So that's your inconsistency, right?
And I thought that the board was working, I know we, to Donna's point, we've had this discussion many times on updating the land use ordinance so that if you're doing something in DB one, or you're doing something in R1 or R2, you get handed, and I think that's part of some of the work that they're doing, but I don't know where that is right now, I'm not sure if that's even moving forward or not.
Do you want me to entertain the workshop?
Yes, well, that was another piece that I wanna discuss and see, what else the board thought, and then we could figure out a time frame to kinda all meet together and, around a campfire with 16 beers or something.
Yeah.
Well, the last time we did this on the, my suggestion would be, unless it's strong objection to the board, when we did the street design, we used our off Mondays or Tuesdays to do that, and it seemed to be a very bad time for planning board members to show up. Is it okay if I schedule something on an off Thursday of theirs? So we'll, if we can make it, they'll have no excuse not to make it, because it'll be on Thursday that they generally schedule. Is that okay?
Works for me.
I'll work on that, and I'll report out.
Any other discussion on that from the board, comments?
Now, and are you gonna check with, Southern Maine Regional Planning to see if
I
it is
can,
something that's even feasible, or,
I can, I don't think we wanna go there quite yet.
oh, okay.
I can reach out to Paul over there and find out what cost may be involved.
I think my suggestion or comment to the rest of the board would be, you know, kind of, we've all been around long enough, some of you guys have dealt with, directly with them. So I think it would be good, when we do meet with them, to kind of say, hey, look, this is what we see, this, you know, kind of, we need to bring up examples and not just, you know, pull from thin air and say, well, you know, hearsay information, let's bring up some examples, let's bring up, so that we can kind of help them, point them in the right direction,
I agree.
you know. Whether that'll work or not, who knows, but it's worth a shot.
Yeah, we'll put, Ted and I'll put together an agenda too, so we can stay on task here. Okay.
Okay. Other business, any motion for, payable?
Yeah, there's no payroll.
Yeah,
It's
there's
just
no payroll,
it's
it's only
just
payable.
payable, so moved.
Motion by Velma, seconded by Jason, all those in favor? Okay. Anybody got anything else that they wanna bring up?
You already done that?
Yep, it's over to you. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn at 8:16 by Jason,
Second.
seconded by Phil. All those in favor? Motion carried.
And God made me for that.
Well, I didn't dare to speak, I didn't wanna, I didn't wanna